Hey guys, tonight we begin with the history of baseball. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. There is something about the way light falls across a baseball diamond in the late afternoon that seems to hold all of time within its embrace. The shadows stretch long and deliberate, reaching toward home plate like fingers of memory itself, and in that golden hour you can almost hear the whispers of every game that has ever been played, every crack of the bat that has ever sung through the American air. The grass, meticulously maintained and carefully cut in patterns that speak to our deepest need for order and beauty, catches the light like emerald velvet, each blade standing as testament to the thousands of hands that have tended this sacred ground. Baseball, you see, is not merely a game. It is a repository of dreams, a cathedral built not of stone and mortar but of grass and dirt and the accumulated hopes of generations. It is a conversation between past and present, conducted in the language of 9 innings, where time moves not in minutes, but in moments. Each pitch a sentence in an ongoing story that began in the pastoral fields of 19th century America, and continues to unfold beneath the lights of stadiums across the world. The very earth beneath our feet holds the footsteps of legends, the tears of the heartbroken, the shouts of the triumphant. To understand baseball is to understand something essential about the American soul, about the way we measure ourselves against the infinite, about the patience required to watch a game where failure is not just possible, but inevitable, where the greatest hitters succeed only 3 times out of 10, where perfection is so rare it becomes mythical. It is a game of inches and eternities, of heartbreak and redemption, of the solitary figure standing in the batter's box facing not just a pitcher, but the accumulated weight of history itself. The batter's box, those narrow rectangles of packed earth on either side of home plate, becomes a stage where individual drama plays out against the backdrop of collective memory. The story begins, as many American stories do, in a place where myth and reality blur together like heat rising from summer asphalt. Cooperstown, New York, that small town nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, has long claimed to be the birthplace of baseball, though historians will tell you that the truth is far more complex, far more beautiful in its messiness than any single origin story could capture. The myth tells us that Abner Doubleday invented baseball in a cow pasture in 1839, but the reality is that baseball evolved slowly, organically, from older games brought to America by immigrants and transformed by the particular genius of a young nation hungry for its own traditions. The games that preceded baseball, rounders from England, schlagball from Germany, la soule from France, each contributed elements to what would become America's national pastime. These were folk games, played in village squares and country fields, carried in the memories of people seeking new lives in a new world. The genius of early baseball was not in its invention, but in its synthesis, the way it took disparate elements and wove them into something uniquely American, something that captured the democratic spirit of a nation still defining itself. Alexander Joy Cartwright, a name that deserves to be spoken with the reverence reserved for poets and philosophers, was perhaps the first to recognize that this children's game of hitting a ball with a stick could become something transcendent. In 1845, in the bustling streets of New York City, where the sounds of commerce and construction mingled with the cries of street vendors and the clip-clop of horse-drawn carriages, Cartwright took the scattered rules of various bat and ball games and wove them into something coherent, something that would endure. The Knickerbocker Base Ball Club, formed in that same year, played by rules that would be recognizable to us today. 9 players to a side, 9 innings to a game, 90 feet between bases. The Elysian Fields in Hoboken, New Jersey, where the Knickerbockers played their first formal games, was a pastoral retreat from the industrial chaos of Manhattan. Here, on manicured grounds overlooking the Hudson River, gentlemen in top hats and formal wear gathered to play this new game according to written rules. The contrast between the formal attire and the informal nature of play created a uniquely American paradox. A democratic game played by aristocratic participants, a rough sport refined by genteel sensibilities. 90 feet. Think about that distance for a moment. 90 feet between first and second base, between second and third, between third and home. It is a distance that seems arbitrary until you realize it is perfect, as if the very dimensions of the game were calibrated to match the human spirit itself. 90 feet is far enough to require real effort, close enough to offer genuine hope. A step shorter and every ground ball becomes an out. A step longer and every ground ball becomes a hit. It is the distance between certainty and possibility, between the known and the unknowable. This distance forces the runner to sprint with everything he has while giving the fielder just enough time to make the play, creating that essential tension that makes baseball's simplest play, the throw to first base, into a moment of genuine drama. The early games were played in fields that had been carved from the wilderness, where the boundary between fair and foul territory was often determined by the natural contours of the land. These were not the manicured diamonds we know today, but rough approximations of perfection, where a bad hop might be caused by a gopher hole or a well-placed stone, where the infield was often nothing more than packed dirt, and the outfield was whatever grass happened to grow there. The players wore no uniforms, no gloves, no protective equipment. They played for the pure joy of it, for the satisfaction of a well-struck ball, for the camaraderie that came from shared struggle and shared triumph. The absence of gloves in these early years meant that fielding was a test of courage as much as skill. Players caught hard-hit balls with their bare hands, developing techniques for cushioning the impact and accepting that bruised and broken fingers were simply part of the game. The first gloves, when they appeared in the 1870s, were little more than work gloves with the fingertips cut off, offering minimal protection but maximum sensitivity. The evolution of the baseball glove from these humble beginnings to the sophisticated equipment of today mirrors the evolution of the game itself, from rough approximation to refined art. In those earliest days, baseball was a gentleman's game, played by men who worked in banks and shops and offices, who gathered on weekends to test themselves against the fundamental challenges of the sport. To hit a round ball with a round bat, to field a sphere that seemed to obey its own mysterious laws of physics, to throw with accuracy and catch with certainty. It was a game that required no special equipment, no particular physical gifts, only the willingness to fail repeatedly in pursuit of occasional success. The democratic nature of these early clubs was revolutionary. Membership was based not on social standing or wealth, but on the simple desire to play. The rules were simple, yet infinitely complex. 3 strikes and you were out, but what constituted a strike? 4 balls and you walked to first base, but where was the strike zone? The umpire, A figure who would become as essential to the game as the players themselves was given the impossible task of determining truth in real time, of making split-second decisions that would be debated for generations. The umpire was judge and jury, prophet and pariah, the keeper of the game's most sacred trust, fairness. In the early days, umpires were often selected from among the players themselves, creating a system of self-governance that reflected the democratic ideals of the young nation. The first professional umpire, Billy McLean, began officiating games in the 1870s, establishing many of the conventions that persist today. McLean wore a blue suit, stood behind the catcher, and called balls and strikes with an authority that commanded respect even from players who disagreed with his decisions. His innovations, the use of hand signals to communicate with distant spectators, the practice of dusting off home plate between innings, the establishment of a consistent strike zone, became the foundation upon which all future umpiring would be built. As the game spread from New York to Boston to Philadelphia to Chicago, it carried with it something more than entertainment. It carried the promise of democracy itself, the idea that, on a baseball field at least, all men were created equal. Your background, your wealth, your social position mattered less than your ability to hit a curveball or turn a double play. The game was a great leveler, a place where the son of a laborer could stand alongside the son of a banker, and both would be measured by the same unforgiving standard: performance. This meritocratic ideal, while not always perfectly realized, became one of baseball's most powerful attractions and one of its most important contributions to American culture. The spread of baseball followed the expansion of the railroad system, with the teams traveling by train to play games in distant cities. The railroad companies, recognizing the promotional value of baseball, often sponsored teams and provided free transportation to players and equipment. This symbiotic relationship between baseball and the railroads helped establish the game as a truly national phenomenon, connecting cities and regions in ways that had never before been possible. The Chicago Fire of 1871 provided one of the most dramatic examples of baseball's power to heal and unite. The White Stockings ballpark was destroyed in the Great Conflagration, along with much of the city itself. Yet, within months, the team was playing again, providing a symbol of resilience and renewal that inspired the entire city. The rebuilding of the ballpark became a community effort, with citizens donating materials and labor to ensure that baseball would return to Chicago as quickly as possible. The Civil War, that great rupture in American history, might have ended baseball before it truly began. Young men who had been playing the game went off to fight for the Union or the Confederacy, carrying with them bats and balls and the knowledge of how to play. In the camps and hospitals, on the long marches between battles, they taught the game to their fellow soldiers. Baseball became a way of remembering what they were fighting for, a reminder of the America they hoped to return to. Union prisoners at Confederate camps organized baseball games as a way of maintaining morale and physical fitness, while Confederate soldiers used the game as a respite from the horrors of war. The famous Christmas Day game of 1862, played between Union soldiers in a field near Fredericksburg, Virginia, just days after the bloody battle there, demonstrated baseball's power to provide normalcy and hope in the midst of chaos. Soldiers from different regiments, different states, different backgrounds came together for a few hours to play the game they remembered from home. The contrast between the violence of war and the peaceful competition of baseball created a poignant reminder of what they were fighting to preserve. When the war ended, The men who came home brought baseball with them. The game had been transformed by the conflict, made more serious, more organized, more professional. Veterans who had learned the game in Army camps taught it to their sons and neighbors, spreading baseball's influence far beyond its original centers in the Northeast. The war had created a generation of men who understood the value of teamwork, discipline, and collective effort, qualities that translated perfectly to the baseball diamond. The National Association of Baseball Players, formed in 1857, had grown from a handful of clubs to dozens, then hundreds. The game was no longer just a pastime for gentlemen. It was becoming a business, a spectacle, a national obsession. The association's annual conventions became increasingly important events, where rule changes were debated and adopted, where disputes between clubs were resolved, where the future direction of the game was determined. These gatherings brought together representatives from across the country, creating a sense of shared purpose and common identity among baseball's early leaders. The question of amateurism versus professionalism created the first major schism in organized baseball. The purists argued that paying players would corrupt the game's essential character, transforming sport into mere commerce. The pragmatists countered that the best players deserved compensation for their skills, and that professional baseball would improve the quality of play while providing entertainment for the masses. This debate reflected larger questions about the role of money and commerce in American society, questions that would resurface repeatedly throughout baseball's history. The first professional team, the Cincinnati Red Stockings, took the field in 1869, and with them, baseball crossed a threshold from which there could be no return. These men were paid to play, and with payment came expectation, pressure, the weight of other people's investment in their success. The game retained its essential character, but it gained something else: stakes. Every at-bat mattered not just for the joy of it, but for the livelihood of the men who played. The Red Stockings' red flannel uniforms, knickers, and long stockings created a visual spectacle that was as important as their athletic performance, establishing the principle that professional baseball was as much about entertainment as it was about competition. Harry Wright, the manager of that first professional team, understood that baseball was more than just a game. It was theater, entertainment, a way of bringing communities together around a shared experience. Wright, an English-born cricket player who had converted to baseball, brought a level of strategic thinking and organizational skill that had been largely absent from the amateur game. His innovations, scheduled practice sessions, detailed statistics, strategic positioning of players, became the foundation of modern baseball management. The Red Stockings traveled by train from city to city, playing local teams, spreading the gospel of organized baseball to places where it had never been seen. They were missionaries of the diamond, and their message was simple. This game, this beautiful, frustrating, impossible game, belonged to everyone. Their undefeated season of 1869, 65 wins and 1 tie, captured the imagination of the entire country, and proved that professional baseball could attract audiences large enough to sustain the economic model that Wright and his backers had envisioned. The success of the Red Stockings sparked a revolution. Professional teams sprouted in cities across the country, each one claiming to represent not just their players, but their entire community. The Chicago White Stockings, the Boston Red Stockings, the Philadelphia Athletics. These names became talismans, symbols of civic pride and identity. To support your local team was to support your city, your neighbors, your vision of what America could be. The rivalry between cities, played out on baseball diamonds, became a safe and entertaining way for communities to compete and compare themselves with one another. The economic panic of 1873 tested the viability of professional baseball, forcing several teams to fold and demonstrating the precarious nature of the early professional game. Teams that survived did so by cutting expenses, reducing salaries, and finding creative ways to maintain fan interest despite reduced resources. The crisis taught early baseball executives valuable lessons about fiscal responsibility and the importance of building sustainable business models rather than relying solely on the enthusiasm of investors and fans. In 1876, the National League was formed, and with it came the structure that would define professional baseball for generations. 8 teams, a defined schedule, standardized rules, and, most importantly, a sense of legitimacy. The National League was not just a collection of teams, it was an institution, a recognition that baseball had become something permanent, something essential to American culture. William Hulbert, the Chicago businessman who orchestrated the league's formation, envisioned an organization that would bring stability and respectability to professional baseball, while protecting the interests of both players and owners. The league's first season was marked by controversy and conflict, including the expulsion of 4 players for gambling and the folding of 2 franchises before the season was complete. These early challenges established important precedents about the league's authority and its commitment to maintaining the integrity of the game. The decision to expel the Louisville players sent a clear message that gambling would not be tolerated, even at the cost of losing talented players and disrupting the competitive balance of the league. The ballparks of this era were intimate affairs, built in the hearts of neighborhoods where the crack of the bat mingled with the sounds of daily life. The Polo Grounds in New York, nestled in the shadow of Coogan's Bluff, where the odd dimensions of the field created a unique challenge for players and fans alike. The left field line was only 279 feet from home plate, while center field stretched to a vast 483 feet. These quirks were not seen as flaws, but as character, as part of what made each ballpark unique, each game a slightly different variation on the same essential theme. The construction of these early ballparks reflected the industrial ingenuity of the age. Built primarily of wood, they featured elaborate Victorian architecture with decorative trim and ornate grandstands. The South End grounds in Boston, with its distinctive turrets and towers, looked more like a medieval castle than a sporting venue. The original Yankee Stadium, completed in 1923, was hailed as the house that Ruth built, but its predecessor, Hilltop Park, was a wooden structure that captured the intimate neighborhood character of early baseball. The relationship between ballparks and their surrounding communities was organic and essential. Children would gather outside the gates during games, hoping to retrieve foul balls that sailed over the fences. Local merchants would set up stands selling peanuts, popcorn, and soda pop. The ballpark became the center of community life during the baseball season, a place where neighbors gathered to share in the triumphs and disappointments of their local team. The players of this era were larger than life, yet unmistakably human. Cap Anson, whose career spanned the transition from amateur to professional baseball, was both a brilliant player and a deeply flawed man, whose racist views would help establish the color line that would shame the game for decades. His statistics were impressive. Over 3,000 hits in an era when such numbers were almost unimaginable. But his legacy is complicated by his role in excluding African American players from organized baseball. Anson's influence extended far beyond his individual performance. As a manager and team captain, he helped establish many of the strategic and tactical approaches that would define baseball for generations. The color line that Anson helped establish was not written into any official rule, but it was understood, enforced through a combination of custom, prejudice, and cowardice. This unwritten law would rob the game of some of its greatest talents for more than 60 years, creating a parallel universe of Negro League baseball that was often superior in quality to the white leagues that claimed to represent the pinnacle of the sport. The exclusion of black players was a moral failure that contradicted baseball's democratic ideals and diminished the game's claim to represent the best of American values. Moses Fleetwood Walker, who played for Toledo in the American Association in 1884, was the last black player to compete in the major leagues before Jackie Robinson. Walker's career was brief and troubled, marked by threats, violence, and constant harassment from fans and opposing players. His experience demonstrated both the potential for integration and the powerful forces that would prevent it for more than half a century. The Negro Leagues that emerged in response to baseball's color line created their own rich tradition of excellence and innovation. Teams like the Kansas City Monarchs, the Homestead Grays, and the Negro National League's Pittsburgh Crawfords featured players whose skills rivaled or exceeded those of their white counterparts. The barnstorming tradition of Negro League teams, which saw them travel constantly to play games wherever they could find opponents and audiences, created a style of play that emphasized creativity, athleticism, and entertainment value. Even as professional baseball struggled with its own moral contradictions, the game itself continued to evolve. The pitching mound was established at its current distance of 60 feet, 6 inches in 1893, a change that fundamentally altered the balance between pitcher and hitter. Before this change, pitchers threw from only 50 feet away, making the game more of a test of reflexes than of skill. The additional 10.5 feet gave hitters more time to see the ball, to make adjustments, to turn baseball into the chess match between pitcher and batter that it remains today. The origins of the 60 feet, 6 inches distance are shrouded in mystery and myth. Some claim it was a mistake, that the surveyor's tape was misread, and the distance should have been 60 feet even. Others argue that it was a carefully calculated compromise between the interests of pitchers and hitters. Whatever the truth, the distance proved to be perfect, creating a balance between offense and defense that has endured for more than a century. The introduction of the pitcher's mound itself, a raised area in the center of the diamond, added another strategic element to the game. The height of the mound, originally unlimited, later standardized at 15 inches, then reduced to 10 inches in 1969, has been adjusted repeatedly to maintain competitive balance. The mound gives pitchers a mechanical advantage, allowing them to throw downhill and gain additional velocity and movement on their pitches. The development of new pitches during this era transformed the art of pitching from simple fastball throwing to a sophisticated craft involving multiple types of deliveries. The curveball, attributed to Candy Cummings in the 1870s, was initially considered unsporting by some who believed that any deviation from a straight throw was somehow unfair. The slider, the changeup, the knuckleball. Each new pitch added layers of complexity to the game and required hitters to develop new skills and strategies. The turn of the century brought with it new heroes, new stories, new ways of understanding what baseball could mean. Honus Wagner, the bow-legged shortstop from Pennsylvania, played with a grace that seemed to defy his awkward appearance. His hands, large and powerful, could pluck ground balls from the dirt with the delicacy of a surgeon, yet swing a bat with the violence of a lumberjack. He was the first superstar of the modern era, a player whose fame transcended the game itself. Wagner's approach to the game was workmanlike and professional, setting a standard for dedication and consistency that would influence generations of players. Wagner's famous baseball card, produced by the American Tobacco Company in 1909, became one of the most valuable collectibles in sports history. The card was withdrawn from production after Wagner objected to his image being used to promote tobacco products, making it extremely rare and highly sought after by collectors. The story of the Wagner card illustrates the early tension between athletes and commercial endorsements, a relationship that would become increasingly important as professional sports grew in popularity and profitability. Cy Young, whose name would become synonymous with pitching excellence, won 511 games in his career, a record that stands so far above any modern pitcher that it seems to belong to a different sport entirely. Young pitched in an era when starting pitchers were expected to finish what they started, when a complete game was not an achievement but an expectation. He threw with a motion that was both economical and devastating, conserving energy while maximizing effectiveness. His approach to pitching was like his approach to life, methodical, persistent, unadorned by flash or pretension. Young's longevity was as impressive as his success. He pitched for 22 seasons, maintaining his effectiveness well into his 40s at a time when most players were forced to retire in their 30s. His conditioning regimen, which included chopping wood and doing farm work during the off-season, became legendary among his contemporaries. Young's career bridged the gap between the rough-and-tumble early days of professional baseball and the more sophisticated era that followed, making him a living link between different generations of the game. The Cy Young Award, established in 1956 to honor the best pitcher in each league annually, ensures that Young's name remains forever associated with pitching excellence. The award's criteria, which emphasize wins, earned run average, and overall contribution to team success, reflect the values and priorities of Young's era while adapting to the changing nature of the pitcher's role in modern baseball. The dead ball era, roughly from 1900 to 1920, was characterized by low-scoring games, strategic play, and a style of baseball that emphasized speed, defense, and situational hitting over the long ball. Home runs were rare, precious events that could change the entire complexion of a game. Players like Ty Cobb perfected the art of getting on base by any means necessary, then using speed and cunning to advance around the bases. Cobb's style was aggressive to the point of violence, his spikes sharpened to intimidate fielders who might dare to block his path. The baseball used during the dead ball era was indeed dead compared to modern standards. The ball was softer, less tightly wound, and made from inferior materials that caused it to lose its shape and resilience during the course of a game. Teams typically used only a few balls per game, playing with scuffed, misshapen spheres that were difficult to hit hard or far. Pitchers took advantage of these conditions by doctoring the ball with foreign substances, creating unpredictable movement that made hitting even more challenging. Ty Cobb embodied the fierce competitiveness of the dead ball era. His .366 lifetime batting average remains the highest in Major League history, a testament to his scientific approach to hitting and his relentless pursuit of perfection. Cobb studied opposing pitchers obsessively, looking for tells and tendencies that might give him an advantage. His ability to hit to all fields, to adjust his approach based on the game situation, and to steal bases with audacious timing made him the most complete player of his generation. Cobb's reputation for violence and ruthlessness, while partially exaggerated by later accounts, was rooted in his genuine belief that baseball was war, and that every advantage, however slight, was worth pursuing. His famous slide into third base that allegedly injured an opposing player became symbolic of his approach to the game, though many of the stories about his viciousness were embellished or invented by sports writers seeking to create colorful copy. The ballparks of this era were vast, sprawling affairs where a well-hit ball might roll for what seemed like miles before being retrieved. Outfielders played shallow, knowing that most hits would be grounders or line drives that needed to be cut off quickly. The dimensions of parks like the Polo Grounds, with its ridiculously short foul lines and impossibly deep center field, created a style of play that was uniquely suited to the dead ball era. The Huntington Avenue grounds in Boston featured a left field foul territory so expansive that many foul balls that would be home runs in modern parks were caught for outs. Inside the park home runs were common during this period, as were triples and other extra base hits that resulted from balls rolling to distant corners of the outfield. The lack of outfield walls in many parks meant that a well-placed hit could roll indefinitely, testing the speed of the batter and the arms of the outfielders. This created a premium on team speed and base-running intelligence, skills that became less important as ballparks became smaller and more standardized. The strategy of the dead ball era was intricate and sophisticated, built around the principle that runs were precious and should be manufactured through careful planning and execution. The hit and run, the suicide squeeze, the steal of home. These tactics required precise timing and flawless execution, but could produce runs without requiring the batter to hit the ball particularly hard or far. Managers like John McGraw of the New York Giants became masters of these strategic elements, turning baseball into a chess match where every move was calculated for maximum advantage. The World Series, first played in 1903 between the Boston Americans and the Pittsburgh Pirates, immediately captured the public imagination as baseball's ultimate test. The series was a best-of-9 affair, reflecting the era's belief that a longer series would provide a more definitive measure of team superiority. The drama of the series, with its comeback victories, outstanding individual performances, and climactic final games, established the template for all future World Series competition. The 1919 World Series, forever tainted by the Black Sox scandal, demonstrated both baseball's cultural importance and its vulnerability to corruption. The conspiracy to fix the series involved 8 members of the Chicago White Sox, including some of the game's biggest stars. The scandal shook public confidence in baseball and led to the appointment of Kennesaw Mountain Landis as the game's first commissioner. Landis's lifetime ban of the 8 players, regardless of their legal culpability, established the principle that baseball's integrity was more important than any individual player's career. And then, in 1920, everything changed. Babe Ruth, a pitcher of considerable talent who had been converted to an outfielder, began hitting home runs with a frequency that seemed to violate the natural order of the game. Ruth didn't just hit home runs, he launched them into territories that had previously been considered unreachable, transforming baseball from a game of inches to a game of miles. His swing was different from anything that had come before. a violent, uppercut motion that sacrificed contact for power and changed the fundamental relationship between hitter and pitcher. Ruth's emergence coincided with changes in the ball itself, with the banning of the spitball and other trick pitches, with a new emphasis on offense that would define baseball for generations. The lively ball era had begun, and with it, a new way of thinking about what baseball could be. No longer was it enough to scratch out runs one at a time. Now, with one swing of the bat, a player could change the entire game. The introduction of the cork center baseball in 1910 had begun this transformation, but it was Ruth's success that convinced both players and fans that the home run could be a viable and exciting strategy. The 1920s were baseball's golden age, a time when the game captured the imagination of the country in ways that would not be seen again until the television era. Ruth was the perfect hero for the Jazz Age, a larger-than-life figure whose appetites matched his accomplishments. He ate prodigiously, drank enthusiastically, and lived with the kind of unbridled joy that made him beloved by fans and sports writers alike. His home runs were not just athletic achievements. They were celebrations of American optimism, proof that in this country anything was possible. Ruth's impact extended far beyond statistics. He single-handedly increased attendance at baseball games, saved franchises from bankruptcy, and established the template for the modern sports celebrity. His salary demands, he famously earned more than President Herbert Hoover, challenged traditional notions about the proper relationship between athletes and society. Ruth's success demonstrated that exceptional talent could command exceptional compensation, paving the way for the modern economics of professional sports. The Yankees of this era were perhaps the greatest team in baseball history, a collection of talents so impressive that they were known simply as Murderers Row. Along with Ruth, they had Lou Gehrig, the Iron Horse, whose quiet dignity and relentless consistency provided the perfect counterpoint to Ruth's flamboyance. Gehrig played 2,130 consecutive games, a record that stood for decades as a testament to durability and dedication. His farewell speech, delivered at Yankee Stadium after he had been diagnosed with the disease that would bear his name, remains one of the most moving moments in sports history. The 1927 Yankees, widely considered the greatest team ever assembled, won 110 games and swept the Pittsburgh Pirates in the World Series. The team's offensive statistics were staggering. They scored 975 runs, hit 158 home runs, and had a team batting average of .307. The combination of Ruth's power, Gehrig's consistency, and the supporting cast of players like Tony Lazzeri, Bob Meusel, and Earl Combs created a lineup that opposing pitchers approached with genuine fear. The construction of Yankee Stadium in 1923 was as much a tribute to Ruth as it was a business necessity. The stadium's dimensions, with a short right field designed to accommodate Ruth's left-handed swing, reflected the new reality that ballparks could be designed around individual players' strengths. The massive size of the stadium, which could accommodate more than 70,000 fans, demonstrated the enormous drawing power of Ruth and the Yankees. Miller Huggins, the diminutive manager who guided the Yankees through their greatest years, was the perfect foil for his larger-than-life players. Huggins understood that managing superstars required a different approach than managing ordinary players. His ability to handle Ruth's personality while maintaining team discipline was crucial to the Yankees' success during this period. The Great Depression tested baseball's place in American culture, but rather than diminishing the game's importance, the economic hardship seemed to increase it. Baseball became an escape, a way for people to forget their troubles for a few hours and lose themselves in the drama of the game. The players of this era carried a special responsibility, knowing that their performance on the field could bring joy to people who had precious little of it in their daily lives. Attendance dropped significantly during the worst years of the Depression, forcing teams to find creative ways to attract fans and reduce costs. The introduction of night baseball in 1935, when the Cincinnati Reds installed lights at Crossley Field, represented a crucial innovation that helped baseball reach new audiences. Workers who could not attend afternoon games could now see Major League Baseball after finishing their jobs. The novelty of night baseball initially drew large crowds, though some traditionalists worried that the artificial lighting would change the fundamental character of the game. Radio broadcasting of baseball games became increasingly important during the Depression, bringing the game into homes across the country and creating a new form of shared experience. Announcers like Graham McNamee and Red Barber became celebrities in their own right, their voices as familiar to fans as those of the players themselves. The radio broadcasts created a sense of community among listeners, who could follow their favorite teams even when they couldn't afford to attend games. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president who would lead the country through the Depression and World War II, understood baseball's importance to national morale. When Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis asked whether baseball should suspend play during the war, Roosevelt responded with what became known as the Green Light Letter, encouraging the game to continue. Baseball, he wrote, was good for the country, a source of recreation and relaxation that would help sustain the American spirit during the dark days ahead. The war years were a time of improvisation and adaptation for baseball. The best players went off to serve their country, leaving behind a game that had to reinvent itself with older players, younger players, and, in some cases, women players. The quality of play declined, but the emotional intensity increased as fans understood that they were watching something precious and fragile that might not survive the global conflict. The All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, immortalized decades later in the film A League of Their Own, was more than just a wartime curiosity. It was proof that baseball's appeal transcended gender, that the game's essential qualities, the strategic thinking, the athletic skill, the dramatic tension, could be appreciated by anyone willing to understand its complexities. The league's founder, Philip Wrigley, understood that maintaining public interest in baseball during the war required innovation and creativity. The women who played in the league faced unique challenges and pressures. They were expected to be both skilled athletes and feminine role models, to prove that women could play baseball at a high level while maintaining their traditional social roles. The league's emphasis on appearance and deportment reflected the social constraints of the era, but the quality of play was genuine and impressive. Wartime baseball also saw the extensive use of spring training facilities in the North, as travel restrictions made it impossible for teams to train in Florida and Arizona. The Chicago Cubs trained on their home field at Wrigley Field, while other teams found creative solutions to prepare for the season without their traditional warm-weather venues. These adaptations brought spring training closer to the fans and created new traditions that would influence the game's development. When the war ended and the players returned, baseball experienced a renaissance. The game had been enriched by its wartime experiences, made more inclusive, more creative, more aware of its own possibilities. Veterans who had served in different theaters of war brought back new perspectives and experiences that influenced their approach to the game. the stage was set for one of the most important moments in American history, a moment that would be played out on a baseball diamond in Brooklyn, New York. Jackie Robinson's arrival in the major leagues in 1947 was more than just the breaking of baseball's color barrier. It was a fundamental challenge to the American system of racial segregation. Robinson had been chosen not just for his athletic ability, but for his character, his intelligence, his capacity to withstand the pressure that would inevitably come with being the first black player in the modern era. Branch Rickey, the Brooklyn Dodgers executive who signed Robinson, understood that this was about more than baseball. It was about justice, about the American promise of equality, about the power of sport to change society. The selection process that led to Robinson's signing was exhaustive and deliberate. Rickey interviewed numerous candidates from the Negro Leagues, looking for a player who possessed not only exceptional skill, but also the temperament to handle the inevitable abuse and pressure. Robinson's background — he was a college graduate, a former Army officer, and a player with experience in integrated settings — made him uniquely qualified for the role he would be asked to play. The abuse that Robinson faced from fans, from opposing players, even from some of his own teammates, was vicious and sustained. Death threats arrived in the mail with disturbing regularity. Hotels refused him accommodation, restaurants denied him service, and opposing players targeted him with deliberate attempts to injure. Yet he persevered, playing with a skill and grace that made it impossible to deny his right to be on the field. His success opened the door for other black players, transforming baseball from a segregated sport into a truly integrated one. Robinson's first season was a trial by fire that tested not only his athletic ability, but his emotional resilience. The pressure he faced was unlike anything experienced by any player before or since. He was representing not just himself but his entire race, carrying the hopes and expectations of millions of African Americans who had been denied opportunities in organized baseball. His performance, Rookie of the Year in 1947, Batting Champion in 1949, MVP in 1949, proved that he belonged not just as a token, but as a star. The Negro Leagues, which had provided opportunities for black players during the years of exclusion, began to fade as their best players moved to the major leagues. This integration was bittersweet. It represented progress toward equality, but also meant the end of institutions that had served as sources of pride and community for black Americans. Teams like the Kansas City Monarchs and the Homestead Grays had been more than just baseball teams. They were symbols of black excellence and self-determination. The Negro League players who had been denied opportunities during their prime years faced particular challenges as integration began. Many were too old to make the transition to the major leagues, while others struggled to adapt to different styles of play and organizational structures. The compensation they received for their years of excellence was minimal, and recognition of their achievements was slow to come. Satchel Paige, perhaps the greatest pitcher in Negro League history, finally reached the major leagues at age 42, well past his prime. His success with the Cleveland Indians demonstrated what might have been possible if integration had occurred earlier. Paige's wit, personality, and pitching prowess made him a fan favorite and helped ease the transition for other Negro League veterans who would follow. The integration of baseball was not just about fairness, it was about excellence. The black players who entered the major leagues in the 1940s and 1950s brought with them a style of play that had been honed in the Negro Leagues, a style that emphasized speed, aggression, and creativity. Players like Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, and Roberto Clemente didn't just integrate baseball, they revolutionized it, showing that there were new ways to play the game, new standards of excellence to be achieved. Willie Mays, the Say Hey Kid, combined power, speed, and defensive brilliance in ways that redefined what was possible for an outfielder. His basket catch, his over-the-shoulder grab in the 1954 World Series, his ability to steal bases and hit home runs with equal facility. All of these elements came together to create a player who seemed to embody pure baseball talent. Mays played with a joy and enthusiasm that was infectious, reminding fans that baseball was, at its core, supposed to be fun. Hank Aaron's pursuit of Babe Ruth's home run record became one of the most dramatic and socially significant storylines in sports history. Aaron faced death threats and racial harassment as he approached Ruth's mark of 714 home runs. Yet he continued to play with dignity and determination. His breaking of the record on April 8, 1974, was a moment of triumph not just for Aaron, but for all Americans who believed in equality and justice. Roberto Clemente brought a Latin flair to baseball that expanded the game's cultural reach and appeal. His defensive play was artistic in its beauty and effectiveness, while his hitting was characterized by an aggressive approach that could turn any pitch into a hit. Clemente's tragic death in a plane crash while delivering aid to earthquake victims in Nicaragua made him a martyr for humanitarian causes and demonstrated that athletes could use their fame for purposes beyond personal gain. The 1950s were a decade of unprecedented excitement in baseball, dominated by the rivalry between the New York Yankees and the Brooklyn Dodgers. These teams met in the World Series 6 times during the decade, creating a series of memorable moments that would be replayed and remembered for generations. The Yankees, with their tradition of excellence and their roster of future Hall of Famers, represented one vision of baseball success. The Dodgers, with their working-class fan base and their history of heartbreak, represented another. The geographical proximity of the teams, separated by just a few subway stops, intensified the rivalry and made it accessible to fans throughout the New York metropolitan area. The contrast between the teams' identities, the corporate Yankees versus the scrappy Dodgers, created narrative tension that transcended sports and touched on broader themes of class, tradition, and social change. Casey Stengel, the Yankees manager during this period, was a master of platooning and strategic substitution, who maximized his team's advantages while minimizing their weaknesses. His use of multiple catchers, his rotation of outfielders based on matchups, and his ability to get the most out of aging veterans made him one of the most successful managers in baseball history. Stengel's colorful personality and rambling speaking style made him a favorite of sports writers and helped maintain public interest in the Yankees dynasty. The 1955 World Series, when the Dodgers finally defeated the Yankees to win their first championship, was more than just a baseball victory. It was a moment of pure joy for the borough of Brooklyn, a vindication of decades of faithful support. The celebration that followed was one of the most spontaneous and joyful in New York history, a reminder of the power of sport to bring communities together in ways that nothing else could. Johnny Podres's shutout victory in Game 7 made him an instant hero and validated the Dodgers' decision to trust their young pitcher in the most important game in franchise history. The Dodgers' championship was particularly meaningful because it represented the triumph of a team that had been built around integration and innovation. Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella, and Don Newcombe were central figures on the team, proving that diversity could be a source of strength rather than division. The team's success validated Branch Rickey's vision and demonstrated that doing the right thing could also be the winning thing. But even as baseball reached new heights of popularity and cultural significance, changes were coming that would challenge the game's traditional structures. The most significant of these was the decision by the Dodgers and the New York Giants to move to California after the 1957 season. The loss of these two storied franchises was a devastating blow to their fans, but it also marked the beginning of baseball's transformation from a regional sport to a truly national one. Walter O'Malley, the Dodgers owner who orchestrated the move to Los Angeles, was vilified by Brooklyn fans, but was actually responding to legitimate business concerns. Ebbets Field was aging and inadequate. The neighborhood around the ballpark was declining, and the team's attendance was dropping despite their on-field success. O'Malley's attempts to build a new stadium in Brooklyn were frustrated by political obstacles and community opposition. The move to California was more than just a business decision. It was a recognition that America itself was changing, that the population was moving west, that the game needed to follow if it wanted to remain relevant. The Dodgers' move to Los Angeles and the Giants' move to San Francisco brought Major League Baseball to the West Coast for the first time, opening up new markets and new possibilities for growth. The success of these franchises in their new homes validated the decision and encouraged other teams to consider similar moves. The Dodgers' first years in Los Angeles were played at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, a football stadium that was ill-suited for baseball. The left field foul line was only 251 feet from home plate, requiring the installation of a 42-foot high screen to prevent cheap home runs. Despite these awkward conditions, the team drew enormous crowds and generated the revenue needed to build Dodger Stadium, which opened in 1962 as one of the most beautiful and functional ballparks ever constructed. The 1960s brought with them a new generation of players who would redefine what was possible in baseball. Mickey Mantle, with his combination of power and speed, could hit home runs from either side of the plate that traveled distances that seemed to defy the laws of physics. His career was shortened by injuries, but his impact on the game was immeasurable. He played with a reckless abandon that matched the spirit of the decade, pushing his body to its limits in pursuit of greatness. Mantle's tape-measure home runs became legendary, with some estimated to have traveled more than 500 feet. His ability to generate power from both sides of the plate made him virtually impossible to pitch to, as he could turn on any fastball and drive it out of the park. His speed, despite chronic leg problems, made him a threat to steal bases and score from first base on doubles. The personal struggles that Mantle faced, his father's early death, his own injury problems, his battles with alcohol, humanized him and made his achievements even more remarkable. He played through pain that would have sidelined lesser players, motivated by a sense of duty to his teammates and his fans. His retirement speech, in which he expressed regret about not being a better role model, revealed a depth of character that complemented his athletic ability. Willie Mays, known as the Say Hey Kid, played with a joy that was infectious, a reminder that baseball was, at its core, a game, something to be enjoyed as much as it was to be won. His over-the-shoulder catch in the 1954 World Series remains one of the most iconic moments in baseball history. A perfect fusion of athleticism and instinct that seemed to capture everything that was beautiful about the sport. The catch was made even more remarkable by Mays's subsequent throw, which prevented the runners from advancing and kept the game close. Mays's all-around excellence extended to every aspect of the game. He was one of the few players to combine 600-plus home runs with 300-plus stolen bases, demonstrating a versatility that was unprecedented. His base running intelligence, his ability to read the pitchers and take extra bases, made him a constant threat even when he didn't get a hit. His enthusiasm for the game never waned, even as he aged and his skills diminished. The expansion of baseball in the 1960s, with the addition of new teams and new leagues, diluted the talent pool, but also created new opportunities for players and fans. The American League expanded from 8 to 10 teams in 1961, followed by the National League's expansion to 10 teams in 1962. This growth continued throughout the decade, with more teams added in 1969. Each expansion created new markets for baseball, while also providing opportunities for players who might not have had major league careers in the previous era. The expansion teams faced unique challenges, as they were forced to stock their rosters with players that established teams were willing to part with. The New York Mets, who began play in 1962, became famous for their futility in their early years, losing 120 games in their first season. However, their miraculous championship in 1969 proved that expansion teams could compete if they were patient and made smart decisions. The introduction of the amateur draft in 1965 fundamentally changed the way teams acquired new talent. Previously, teams could sign any amateur player they wanted, leading to bidding wars that favored wealthy franchises. The draft system, which gave the worst teams the first opportunity to select new players, was designed to promote competitive balance and prevent rich teams from monopolizing the best talent. The American League's adoption of the designated hitter in 1973 represented a fundamental change in the game's strategy, removing the pitcher from the batting order and creating a new specialized position that sparked debates that continue to this day. The designated hitter rule was implemented as a way to increase offensive production and create more excitement for fans, but it also changed the strategic elements of the game in ways that many traditionalists found objectionable. The designated hitter created a schism between the two major leagues that persisted for decades, with the American League embracing the innovation while the National League maintained traditional rules. This difference added strategic complexity to interleague play in the World Series, where teams had to adjust their lineups and strategies based on which league's rules were in effect. The 1970s and 1980s were a time of transition for baseball, as the game struggled to adapt to changing social and economic conditions. The rise of free agency, which gave players the right to change teams after a certain number of years of service, fundamentally altered the relationship between players and franchises. No longer were players bound to a single team for their entire careers. Now they could seek the highest bidder, creating a new dynamic that emphasized individual achievement over team loyalty. The Curt Flood case, which challenged baseball's reserve clause in the late 1960s and early 1970s, laid the groundwork for free agency, even though Flood himself never benefited from the change. Flood's willingness to sacrifice his career to challenge what he saw as an unjust system paved the way for future players to have more control over their careers and compensation. The first group of free agents, led by players like Reggie Jackson and Raleigh Fingers, commanded unprecedented salaries and demonstrated the economic potential of player mobility. Jackson's signing with the New York Yankees was particularly significant, as it brought a superstar player to baseball's most visible franchise and created new levels of media attention and fan interest. The drug scandals of the 1980s, particularly the widespread use of amphetamines and later cocaine, revealed the darker side of baseball's competitive culture. Players who had been heroes to millions of fans were exposed as flawed human beings, struggling with the same problems that affected society as a whole. The game's response to these scandals was often inadequate, reflecting a reluctance to confront difficult truths about the culture of professional sports. The Pittsburgh drug trials of 1985 exposed the extent of cocaine use among major league players and led to suspensions and criminal prosecutions that shocked the baseball world. The trials revealed that drug use was not limited to a few bad actors but was widespread throughout the game, involving players from multiple teams and backgrounds. Doc Ellis's revelation that he had pitched a no-hitter while under the influence of LSD became one of the most notorious drug-related stories in baseball history. While Ellis's account was later questioned, it symbolized the chaotic and dangerous relationship that some players had developed with drugs during this period. Yet, even as baseball struggled with these challenges, it continued to produce moments of transcendent beauty. Cal Ripken Jr.'s consecutive games streak, which surpassed Lou Gehrig's seemingly unbreakable record, was a reminder of the values that baseball represented at its best: dedication, persistence, and the quiet heroism of showing up every day and doing your job. Ripken's achievement was celebrated not just because it was statistically impressive, but because it represented something fundamental about the American work ethic. Ripken's streak began almost by accident and continued through a combination of durability, determination, and good fortune. He played through injuries that would have sidelined other players, motivated by a respect for the game and an understanding of what his presence meant to fans. The night he broke Gehrig's record, September 6, 1995, became a celebration not just of individual achievement, but of baseball's enduring values. The 1990s brought with them a new era of offensive explosion, as players began hitting home runs with a frequency that hadn't been seen since the 1920s. The home run chase of 1998, when Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa both surpassed Roger Maris's single-season record, captured the imagination of the country in ways that baseball hadn't experienced in decades. The two sluggers, from different backgrounds and different styles of play, created a narrative that was compelling and dramatic, a reminder of what baseball could be when it was at its best. The summer of 1998 represented a renaissance for baseball, which had been struggling to recover from the 1994 strike that had canceled the World Series. McGwire and Sosa's pursuit of Maris's record created daily drama and media coverage that reminded fans why they had fallen in love with the game. The mutual respect and friendship between the two competitors added a human element that elevated the story beyond mere statistics. McGwire's methodical approach to hitting home runs contrasted sharply with Sosa's exuberant celebrations and infectious enthusiasm. McGwire studied pitchers obsessively, worked with hitting coaches to perfect his swing, and maintained a discipline and focus that were legendary among his peers. Sosa's joy and spontaneity brought a different energy to the chase, making him a favorite among fans who appreciated his obvious love for the game. However, the revelation years later that both McGwire and Sosa, along with many other players of that era, had used performance-enhancing drugs cast a shadow over their achievements. The steroid era, as it came to be known, represented a betrayal of the game's fundamental principles, a willingness to sacrifice integrity for statistical achievement. The records set during this period remain in the books, but they are forever tainted by the knowledge of how they were achieved. The steroid era was characterized by not just individual drug use, but by a culture of willful ignorance on the part of teams, leagues, and media. The signs were obvious: dramatic increases in home run production, players gaining significant muscle mass in their 30s, injury patterns that suggested artificial enhancement. But few wanted to confront the reality because the offensive explosion was good for business. Barry Bonds' breaking of Hank Aaron's career home run record in 2007 was met with less celebration than controversy, as questions about his alleged steroid use overshadowed his achievement. Bonds' natural talent was undeniable. He had been an excellent player before he was suspected of using performance-enhancing drugs. But the cloud of suspicion prevented him from receiving the recognition that would normally accompany such a historic achievement. The Balco scandal, which implicated numerous athletes including Bonds, revealed the sophisticated nature of performance-enhancing drug use in professional sports. The scandal demonstrated that athletes were not just taking crude steroids, but were using designer drugs that were specifically created to avoid detection by existing testing procedures. The game's response to the steroid scandal was eventually swift and comprehensive, with new testing procedures and severe penalties for violations. But the damage to baseball's reputation was significant, and it took years for the game to regain the trust of its fans. The scandal served as a reminder that baseball, like any human institution, was capable of both greatness and failure, often simultaneously. The Mitchell Report, released in 2007, provided the most comprehensive examination of performance-enhancing drug use in baseball. The report named 89 players and provided detailed evidence of the scope and nature of the problem. While the report was criticized for its methodology and conclusions, it forced baseball to confront the reality of its drug problem and implement more effective prevention and detection measures. As baseball entered the 21st century, it faced new challenges and new opportunities. The rise of sabermetrics, the statistical analysis of baseball performance, revolutionized the way teams evaluated players and made strategic decisions. The traditional scouts who had relied on their eyes and experience to judge talent found themselves competing with analysts who used computers and algorithms to identify value that others had missed. Bill James, the father of sabermetrics, had been developing new ways of analyzing baseball performance since the 1970s. But his work didn't gain widespread acceptance until the success of the Oakland Athletics in the early 2000s. James's insight that traditional statistics like batting average and RBIs didn't accurately measure a player's value led to the development of new metrics that better captured player performance. The Moneyball Revolution, popularized by Michael Lewis's book about the Oakland Athletics' use of statistical analysis to compete with wealthier teams, showed that intelligence and innovation could triumph over resources and tradition. Teams that embraced these new methods found ways to compete more effectively, while those that resisted were left behind. The Athletics' success with a limited payroll demonstrated that smart analysis could identify undervalued players and strategies. Billy Beane, the Oakland general manager who implemented the Moneyball approach, became a celebrity in his own right, representing a new type of baseball executive who relied on data rather than intuition. Beane's willingness to challenge conventional wisdom about player evaluation and team building inspired other teams to adopt similar approaches. The integration of advanced statistics into mainstream baseball coverage changed the way fans understood and discussed the game. Statistics like OPS, on base plus slugging, WAR, wins above replacement, and BABIP, batting average on balls in play, became common vocabulary among serious fans, creating a more sophisticated understanding of player performance and team strategy. The globalization of baseball brought new talent and new perspectives to the game. Players from Japan, like Ichiro Suzuki and Hideki Matsui, brought a different style of play that emphasized contact hitting and aggressive base running. Latin American players like Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera continued the tradition of excellence established by earlier generations of international stars. Ichiro's arrival in 2001 created a sensation in both Japan and the United States, with his unique hitting style and approach to the game fascinating fans and analysts alike. His ability to get on base and steal bases, combined with his exceptional defensive skills, made him one of the most complete players of his generation. Ichiro's 262 hits in 2004 broke a record that had stood since 1930, demonstrating that different approaches to hitting could be equally effective. The posting system that allowed Japanese players to move to Major League Baseball created new opportunities for international talent, while also providing revenue for Japanese teams. The system's complexity and the large fees involved demonstrated the growing economic importance of international baseball talent. Latin American academies operated by major league teams created new pathways for young players to develop their skills and pursue professional careers. These academies provided education and training opportunities that might not have been available otherwise, but they also raised questions about the exploitation of young talent and the impact on local baseball cultures. The construction of new ballparks in the 1990s and 2000s represented a return to baseball's roots, with designers creating stadiums that emphasized the game's connection to its history and its communities. These new parks, from Baltimore's Camden Yards to San Francisco's Oracle Park, featured unique dimensions and characteristics that made each one a distinct experience. The era of cookie-cutter stadiums with artificial turf and identical dimensions was over, replaced by a new appreciation for the quirks and character that made each ballpark special. Camden Yards, which opened in 1992, became the template for the retro ballpark movement with its brick facade, asymmetrical dimensions, and integration into the surrounding urban environment. The park's success demonstrated that fans preferred intimate, character-filled venues over sterile, multi-purpose stadiums. The new ballparks also featured extensive amenities and entertainment options that extended beyond baseball itself. These additions helped teams generate additional revenue, while also attracting fans who might not have been interested in baseball alone. The controversy over whether these amenities enhanced or detracted from the baseball experience reflected larger questions about the commercialization of sports. The rise of instant replay and other technological innovations brought new accuracy to the game, but also new controversies. The human element that had always been part of baseball, the missed call, the questionable strike zone, the bang-bang play at first base, was gradually being eliminated by technology. Some fans mourned the loss of these human imperfections, arguing that they were part of what made baseball special. The introduction of instant replay in 2008, initially limited to home run calls, was gradually expanded to include most plays on the field. The replay system improved the accuracy of officiating, but also slowed the pace of games and changed the fundamental relationship between umpires and players. The development of advanced camera systems and computer tracking created new forms of analysis and entertainment for fans. StatCast data, which measures everything from exit velocity to spin rate to launch angle, provided unprecedented insight into player performance and game dynamics. The pace of play became an increasingly important issue as attention spans shortened and competition from other forms of entertainment intensified. Baseball, which had always prided itself on being a timeless game, found itself under pressure to speed up, to adapt to modern expectations while maintaining its essential character. The introduction of pitch clocks and other timing rules represented an acknowledgement that the game needed to evolve to remain relevant. The average length of major league games had increased steadily over decades, from around 2.5 hours in the 1970s to more than 3 hours by the 2010s. This increase was attributed to factors including more pitching changes, longer at-bats, and increased time between pitches. Rob Manfred, who became commissioner in 2015, made pace of play a priority, implementing various rules changes designed to speed up games while maintaining their essential character. These changes included limits on mound visits, automatic intentional walks, and restrictions on the time between innings. The COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 created unprecedented challenges for baseball, as it did for all aspects of society. The season was shortened, played without fans, and conducted under strict health protocols that changed the very nature of the game. The absence of fans from the stadiums was particularly jarring, highlighting the importance of the crowd in creating the atmosphere that makes baseball special. The 2020 season, reduced to 60 games, was played in mostly empty stadiums with artificial crowd noise and cardboard cutouts replacing real fans. The eerie atmosphere created by these conditions reminded everyone involved of how important the human element was to the baseball experience. The pandemic also accelerated changes that had been under consideration for years, including expanded playoffs, universal designated hitter, and new rules designed to speed up play. Some of these changes proved popular enough to be retained after the pandemic ended. Yet, even under these difficult circumstances, baseball found ways to adapt and survive. The 2020 season, though abbreviated, produced compelling storylines and memorable moments. The game's resilience in the face of adversity was a reminder of its fundamental strength, its ability to endure and adapt while maintaining its essential character. The current era of baseball is characterized by a new emphasis on analytics and optimization, with teams using data to make decisions about everything from player positioning to pitch selection. The shift, a defensive alignment that places fielders in positions based on statistical probabilities rather than traditional positioning, has become commonplace, fundamentally changing the game's strategy. The shift has created new strategic considerations for both hitters and managers, with some players learning to hit to the opposite field, while others try to hit over the shifted fielders. Recent rule changes have limited the extent of shifting, representing an attempt to restore balance between offense and defense. The increased use of relief pitchers has changed the nature of starting pitching, with complete games becoming increasingly rare and most starters expected to pitch only 5 or 6 innings. This specialization has created new roles and strategies while also reducing the individual importance of starting pitchers. Young stars like Mike Trout, Ronald Acuna Jr., and Fernando Tatis Jr. represent the new generation of players who combine traditional baseball skills with modern training methods and analytical insights. These players are more athletic, more powerful, and more versatile than their predecessors, pushing the boundaries of what is possible on a baseball field. Mike Trout's combination of power, speed, and plate discipline has made him the prototype for the modern superstar, while his quiet personality and dedication to his craft have earned him respect from fans and peers alike. His ability to excel at every aspect of the game while maintaining consistency year after year has established him as one of the greatest players of his generation. The game's ongoing efforts to increase diversity and inclusion have made progress, but challenges remain. The percentage of African American players in the major leagues has declined significantly since the 1970s, a trend that baseball has acknowledged and is working to address through various youth programs and initiatives. The RBI, Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities, program and other initiatives have attempted to reintroduce baseball to urban communities where basketball and football have become more popular. These programs face challenges including the cost of equipment, the lack of suitable playing facilities, and competition from other sports and activities. Women's involvement in baseball has expanded beyond playing to include coaching, managing, and front office positions. The appointment of women to important roles in team management and operations represents a significant step forward in the game's evolution, though there is still much work to be done. Kim Ng's appointment as general manager of the Miami Marlins in 2020 broke a significant barrier and demonstrated that women could excel in baseball's highest executive positions. Her background in both playing and front office work made her uniquely qualified for the role. The minor leagues, which have always served as baseball's developmental system, have undergone significant changes in recent years, with many teams being eliminated or restructured. These changes have sparked debates about the game's responsibility to smaller communities and the role of professional baseball in American life. The reorganization of the minor leagues in 2021 reduced the number of affiliated teams from 160 to 120, eliminating professional baseball from dozens of communities that had supported teams for decades. The changes were designed to improve the player development and reduce costs, but they also severed historic connections between major league teams and small-town America. Independent leagues have partially filled the void left by minor league contraction, providing opportunities for players to continue their careers while also maintaining professional baseball in communities that lost their affiliated teams. International competitions like the World Baseball Classic have helped spread the game globally while showcasing the diverse talents of players from different cultures and backgrounds. These tournaments have demonstrated that baseball is no longer just an American game, but a truly global sport with passionate fans and skilled players around the world. The World Baseball Classic has created new forms of national pride and international competition, with players choosing to represent their countries of birth or heritage rather than their major league teams. The tournament's format and timing have been adjusted repeatedly to maximize participation and minimize conflicts with regular season play. The Hall of Fame continues to serve as baseball's ultimate honor, though debates about who deserves enshrinement reflect larger questions about the game's values and priorities. The cases of players from the steroid era, in particular, have sparked heated discussions about how to balance individual achievement with questions of integrity and fair play. The voting process for the Hall of Fame has evolved to include more diverse voices and perspectives, with former players joining sports writers in determining which players deserve recognition. The debates over borderline candidates and controversial figures have generated intense discussion among fans and analysts about what constitutes Hall of Fame worthiness. Baseball's relationship with gambling has evolved significantly, with the sport now embracing legalized betting as a source of revenue and fan engagement. This represents a dramatic shift from the game's historical fear of gambling, dating back to the Black Sox scandal of 1919, when members of the Chicago White Sox were accused of intentionally losing the World Series. The integration of betting information and odds into baseball broadcasts and coverage has created new forms of fan engagement, while also raising concerns about the potential for corruption and the impact on the game's integrity. The rise of fantasy baseball and other forms of fan engagement has created new ways for people to connect with the game, turning statistics into a form of entertainment and creating communities of fans who share a deep knowledge of players and teams across the league. These innovations have helped baseball maintain its relevance in an increasingly crowded entertainment landscape. Daily fantasy sports have added another layer of fan engagement, allowing people to compete for prizes based on their ability to select successful players for individual games or short periods. This innovation has created new revenue streams, while also generating controversy about gambling and fair play. As we look to the future, baseball faces both challenges and opportunities. The game's traditional pace and rhythm may seem out of step with modern life, but they also offer something unique, a chance to slow down, to appreciate subtlety and nuance, to find beauty in the space between action rather than just in the action itself. The young fans who discover baseball today inherit a game that is both ancient and modern, both traditional and innovative. They will see things that previous generations could never have imagined. Pitch velocities that push the limits of human capability. Defensive shifts that challenge conventional wisdom. Analytical insights that reveal hidden truths about performance and strategy. Yet they will also experience the same fundamental emotions that have driven baseball fans for more than a century. The hope that builds through a long at-bat. The joy of a perfectly executed play. The heartbreak of a season that ends one game too soon. These emotions are timeless, immune to technological change or cultural evolution. The crack of the bat against the ball remains the same sound that thrilled fans in the 1920s, the 1950s, the 1980s, and today. The arc of a well-hit ball against a blue sky is as beautiful now as it was when Babe Ruth was launching home runs into the stands at Yankee Stadium. The geometry of the game, those perfect 90 feet between bases, the 60 feet and 6 inches from pitcher to batter, remains unchanged, a constant in a world of constant change. Baseball's greatest gift to American culture may be its insistence on taking time, on refusing to be rushed, on creating space for contemplation and reflection. In a world that moves at the speed of light, baseball moves at the speed of thought, allowing fans to savor each moment, to appreciate the strategic complexity that underlies every pitch, every swing, every decision. The game teaches patience, both to those who play it and those who watch it. It rewards careful observation, strategic thinking, and the ability to see patterns and possibilities that others might miss. It celebrates both individual achievement and collective effort, recognizing that baseball is ultimately a team sport that depends on individual excellence. The statistics that baseball generates are not just numbers but stories, narratives that connect past and present, that allow us to compare players across generations and eras. A batting average is not just a mathematical calculation but a measure of consistency and skill. A pitcher's earned run average tells a story about his effectiveness and his team's defense. These numbers become part of the game's mythology, creating a shared language that fans use to communicate their understanding and appreciation of what they've witnessed. The ballpark itself remains one of America's great democratic institutions, a place where people from all walks of life can gather to share in a common experience. The corporate boxes and expensive seats may create hierarchies, but the game itself is the same for everyone. The drama just as compelling from the bleachers as from behind home plate. The hot dog vendor and the Fortune 500 CEO see the same double play, feel the same tension during a close game, share the same hope for their team's success. The rhythm of the baseball season, with its long, gradual build from spring training through the regular season to the playoffs, mirrors the rhythm of life itself. The season begins with hope and unlimited possibility, every team theoretically capable of winning the World Series. As the months pass, some dreams fade while others intensify, until only the best teams remain to compete for the ultimate prize. The concept of the rebuilding year, when a team sacrifices present success for future potential, reflects a uniquely American optimism about the possibility of renewal and redemption. Even the worst teams can look forward to better days, to young players developing into stars, to the possibility that next year will be different, better, more successful. The managers and coaches who guide these teams are often former players themselves, men who understand the game from the inside, who can communicate its complexities to a new generation of players. Their decisions, when to steal a base, when to change pitchers, when to use a pinch hitter, are scrutinized and debated by fans who believe they could do better, creating an ongoing dialogue between the professionals and the passionate amateurs who love the game. The evolution of managerial strategy has reflected broader changes in baseball philosophy and knowledge. The old-school managers who relied on intuition and traditional wisdom have gradually given way to a new generation who embrace statistical analysis while still respecting the human elements of the game. The best modern managers are those who can synthesize data with experience, who understand that numbers tell important stories but don't capture everything that matters in baseball. Joe Torre's success with the New York Yankees in the late 1990s and early 2000s exemplified this balance between old and new approaches. Torre's ability to manage superstar personalities while maintaining team chemistry, combined with his tactical acumen and calm demeanor under pressure, made him one of the most successful managers of his era. His playoff success, winning 4 World Series titles in 5 years, demonstrated that great managing could be the difference between good teams and championship teams. Tony La Russa's innovative use of specialized relievers and situational matchups helped revolutionize late-inning strategy, while his willingness to embrace new statistical insights while maintaining traditional values made him a bridge between different eras of baseball management. La Russa's career, which spanned more than 3 decades, allowed him to adapt to multiple generations of players and evolving approaches to the game. The broadcasters who call the games serve as our guides through this complex world, translating the action for those who are learning the game while providing deeper insights for those who already understand its nuances. The best broadcasters become part of the experience itself, their voices inseparable from our memories of great games and great moments. Vin Scully's 67-year career with the Brooklyn and Los Angeles Dodgers made him the voice of baseball for multiple generations of fans. His poetic descriptions, encyclopedic knowledge, and ability to tell stories that illuminated both the game and the human condition elevated baseball broadcasting to an art form. Scully's approach, painting word pictures that helped listeners visualize the action while providing context and meaning, became the gold standard for baseball broadcasting. Ernie Harwell's distinctive voice and folksy style made him beloved by Detroit Tigers fans for more than 4 decades. His signature calls, "That one is long gone," for home runs, became as much a part of the baseball experience as the action on the field. Harwell's ability to find poetry in the everyday moments of baseball helped fans appreciate the beauty in routine plays as much as spectacular ones. Harry Caray's exuberant style and obvious love for the game made him a celebrity in his own right, while his willingness to criticize players and management when necessary maintained his credibility with fans who appreciated his honesty. Caray's seventh-inning stretch renditions of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" became a beloved tradition that outlasted his own career. Radio has always been baseball's perfect medium, allowing fans to create their own mental images of the action while providing a soundtrack for summer afternoons and evening drives. The rhythm of the announcer's voice, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd. These sounds create an intimacy that television, for all its visual power, cannot quite replicate. The radio broadcast allows for the kind of detailed storytelling and context that helps fans understand not just what is happening, but why it matters. The tradition of the radio call of great moments has created some of the most memorable phrases in sports history. Russ Hodges's "The Giants Win the Pennant" call of Bobby Thompson's 1951 home run remains one of the most famous moments in broadcasting history. Jack Buck's "Go Crazy Folks" call of Ozzie Smith's 1985 home run captured the spontaneous joy that makes baseball special. The minor leagues, often overlooked in discussions of professional baseball, represent something essential about the game's character. These are places where young players learn their craft, where veterans extend their careers, where communities too small for Major League Baseball can still experience the magic of professional sports. The minor league park, with its intimate setting and accessible players, often provides a purer baseball experience than the major leagues, a reminder of what the game was like before it became big business. The minor league experience offers advantages that Major League Baseball cannot match: affordable tickets, parking, and concessions, the ability to sit close to the action and interact with players, a family-friendly atmosphere that emphasizes fun over commerce. Many fans prefer minor league games precisely because they feel more connected to the players and the action. The development of players in the minor leagues is a gradual process that teaches not just baseball skills, but life skills. Young players learn to handle failure, to work with teammates from different backgrounds, to deal with the pressure of performing in front of crowds. The minor leagues serve as a laboratory for both individual development and organizational experimentation. The independent leagues, where players who have been released by major league organizations try to earn one more chance, represent the ultimate expression of baseball's democratic spirit. These leagues are full of dreamers and has-beens, of players who love the game too much to give it up, who continue to compete for the joy of competition itself. The stories of players who make it from independent leagues to the major leagues are rare but inspiring, proof that talent and determination can still triumph over conventional wisdom. The amateur levels of baseball, high school, college, and beyond, are where most fans first encounter the game's deeper meanings. These are the games where sons play for fathers, where communities rally around their local teams, where the outcomes matter intensely to a small group of people even if they don't affect the larger world. The high school pitcher who strikes out the side in a crucial game, the college player who drives in the winning run in a conference championship. These moments may not make the national news, but they are no less meaningful to those who experience them. High school baseball often represents the purest form of the game, where players compete for their schools and communities without thought of professional rewards. The pressure and intensity of high school state tournaments can rival anything found in professional baseball, as entire communities invest their emotions in teenage athletes who are playing for pride and honor rather than money. College baseball has evolved into a sophisticated enterprise that serves as a crucial stepping stone to professional careers while also providing educational opportunities for student athletes. The College World Series in Omaha has become one of the premier amateur sporting events in the country, showcasing the best young talent while maintaining the academic mission that distinguishes college sports from professional athletics. The coaching tree that connects different levels of baseball is one of the sport's most beautiful aspects. The major league manager who learned the game from a high school coach, who in turn learned it from a former professional player, who learned it from another coach in an unbroken chain that stretches back to the game's earliest days. Knowledge and wisdom are passed down through generations, creating a continuity that spans decades and connects different eras of the game. This continuity is not just about technique and strategy, but about values and traditions. Coaches teach respect for the game, for opponents, for umpires, and for teammates. They emphasize the importance of preparation, practice, and persistence. They help young players understand that baseball is not just about individual success, but about contributing to something larger than themselves. The equipment of baseball has evolved dramatically over the years, but the essential elements remain the same. The bat, made of wood at the professional level, connects the modern player to every player who has ever stood in the batter's box. The tactile connection between hitter and ball, transmitted through the wooden bat, provides feedback that allows the best hitters to make split-second adjustments in their swing. The evolution of bat design within the constraints of wood construction has been subtle but significant. Different types of wood, ash, maple, birch, offer different characteristics in terms of weight, density, and durability. The grain structure, the moisture content, and the manufacturing process all affect the bat's performance, creating variations that allow players to customize their equipment to their individual preferences. The glove, which has grown larger and more sophisticated over the decades, still requires the same fundamental skills of hand-eye coordination and quick reflexes. The modern glove is a marvel of engineering, with carefully designed webbing, padding, and pocket construction that maximizes the fielder's ability to catch and control the ball. Yet even the best glove is useless without the skill and instinct to position it correctly and react quickly to batted balls. The development of specialized gloves for different positions has created new possibilities for defensive excellence. The first baseman's mitt, the catcher's gear, the infielder's glove, each is designed to optimize performance for specific defensive requirements. The regulations governing glove size and construction represent an attempt to maintain competitive balance while allowing for innovation and improvement. The ball itself, with its distinctive red stitching and white leather, is crafted by hand using techniques that have remained essentially unchanged for generations. The cowhide cover, the yarn winding, the cork and rubber center. Each component is carefully constructed to create a sphere that behaves predictably while still allowing for the variations in flight and bounce that make baseball challenging and interesting. The manufacturing process for baseballs is surprisingly labor-intensive, with skilled workers hand-stitching each ball using exactly 108 double stitches. The consistency required to produce baseballs that meet major league specifications is extraordinary. Yet, even within these tight tolerances, individual balls can have slightly different characteristics that affect their flight and behavior. The uniforms of baseball, with their stirrups and button-down jerseys, connect the modern game to its historical roots while allowing for individual expression through subtle variations in style and fit. The cap, with its distinctive bill and team logo, has become one of the most recognizable symbols in American culture, worn by people who may never attend a game but want to identify with the values and traditions that baseball represents. The evolution of baseball uniforms reflects both practical considerations and fashion trends. The introduction of synthetic fabrics improved comfort and durability, while maintaining the traditional appearance that fans expect. The addition of names and numbers helped fans identify players while creating new marketing opportunities for teams and manufacturers. The business side of baseball, while sometimes controversial, has allowed the game to grow and evolve while maintaining its essential character. The revenue sharing that helps smaller market teams compete with their wealthier counterparts reflects a recognition that baseball's health depends on competitive balance, on the possibility that any team can win on any given day. The luxury tax system, which penalizes teams that spend above a certain threshold, represents an attempt to maintain competitive balance while allowing successful franchises to benefit from their success. The effectiveness of this system is debated, but it reflects a recognition that baseball's long-term health requires some level of parity among teams. The collective bargaining agreement that governs the relationship between players and owners represents a hard-won balance between the rights of labor and the needs of management. The strikes and lockouts that have occasionally disrupted the game have reminded fans that baseball is not just entertainment, but also a workplace, where real people earn their livings and support their families. The amateur draft system, which gives the worst teams the first opportunity to select new talent, is another mechanism designed to maintain competitive balance. The draft has become a sophisticated process involving scouts, analysts, and psychologists, all working to identify not just talented players, but players who can handle the pressures of professional baseball. The development of player development systems, from rookie leagues to AAA, represents a massive investment in the future of the game. These systems not only prepare players for major league competition, but also serve as laboratories for testing new rules, new equipment, and new approaches to the game. The role of agents in modern baseball has been controversial, but ultimately beneficial to players, ensuring that they receive fair compensation for their talents while also helping them navigate the complex business aspects of professional sports. The best agents serve not just as negotiators, but as counselors, helping players make decisions that will benefit their long-term careers and personal well-being. The medical advances that have extended players' careers and improved their performance are remarkable. From Tommy John surgery that can save pitchers' careers to advanced conditioning programs that help players maintain their skills well into their 30s and beyond. These advances have changed the game in subtle but important ways, allowing players to compete at higher levels for longer periods. The development of specialized training programs for different aspects of baseball performance has created new opportunities for players to improve their skills. Hitting coaches, pitching coaches, strength and conditioning specialists, and mental performance coaches all contribute to player development in ways that were unimaginable in earlier eras. The statistical revolution in baseball has created new ways of understanding and appreciating the game, but it has also created new divisions among fans. The traditionalists who trust their eyes and experience sometimes clash with the analysts who trust their computers and algorithms. The reality is that both approaches have value, and the best understanding of baseball comes from combining traditional observation with modern analysis. The development of new statistics that better capture player value has improved talent evaluation and strategic decision-making. Metrics like WAR, wins above replacement, WOBA, weighted on-base average, and FIP, fielding independent pitching, provide more accurate assessments of player performance than traditional statistics, while also creating new ways for fans to understand and discuss the game. The concept of team chemistry, while difficult to quantify, remains important to many players and coaches. The idea that a group of players can be greater than the sum of their individual talents is supported by numerous examples throughout baseball history. The challenge is identifying what creates good chemistry and how to build it intentionally. The 2004 Boston Red Sox, who overcame a 3-0 deficit to defeat the New York Yankees in the American League Championship Series before sweeping the St. Louis Cardinals in the World Series, exemplified the power of team chemistry and collective belief. The team's combination of talented veterans and enthusiastic young players created a dynamic that transcended individual abilities. The manager's role in modern baseball has evolved significantly, from the field general who made most strategic decisions to a coordinator who implements strategies developed by front office analysts. The best modern managers are those who can bridge the gap between the analytical and the intuitive, who can use data to inform their decisions while still trusting their instincts and experience. The coaching staff that supports the manager has grown dramatically in recent years, with specialized coaches for hitting, pitching, fielding, base running, and even mental performance. This reflects both the increased complexity of the modern game and the recognition that different players need different types of instruction and support. The relationship between players and coaches has become more collaborative, with players expected to take more responsibility for their own development, while coaches provide guidance and support. The days of the authoritarian manager who ruled through fear and intimidation are largely over, replaced by a more nuanced approach that recognizes players as professionals who deserve respect and input into their own careers. The physical demands of playing baseball at the highest level have increased dramatically, with players now expected to maintain peak conditioning year-round. The traditional off-season, when players might return to their regular jobs or simply rest, has been replaced by intensive training programs designed to improve performance and prevent injury. The mental health aspects of professional baseball have received increased attention in recent years, with teams employing sports psychologists and mental health professionals to help players cope with the pressures of competition and the challenges of life in the public eye. The recognition that mental health is as important as physical health represents a significant evolution in how baseball approaches player welfare. The fan experience at modern ballparks has been transformed by technology and changing expectations. The introduction of high-definition video boards, interactive experiences, and advanced food and beverage options has made attending games more entertaining, though some argue that these additions distract from the game itself. The development of ballpark districts around stadiums has created new economic opportunities, while also changing the relationship between teams and their communities. These districts, which often include restaurants, shops, and entertainment venues, extend the baseball experience beyond the game itself while generating additional revenue for teams and local businesses. The tradition of keeping score, once common among serious fans, has declined in the modern era, replaced by instant access to statistics and information on mobile devices. This represents a loss of engagement for some fans, who argue that keeping score forces you to pay closer attention to the game's subtleties and strategic elements. The scorebook itself is a work of art, with its intricate system of symbols and abbreviations that allow fans to record the details of every play. The act of keeping score creates a deeper connection to the game, forcing the scorekeeper to pay attention to details that might otherwise be missed. The seventh-inning stretch remains one of baseball's most beloved traditions, a moment when the entire stadium stands and sings, "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," creating a sense of community and shared experience that transcends team loyalties. This tradition, like many in baseball, serves no practical purpose but adds to the game's unique character and atmosphere. The origins of the seventh-inning stretch are debated, but most historians agree that it began as a practical necessity. Fans needed to stand and stretch after sitting for long periods on uncomfortable wooden benches. The tradition evolved into something more ceremonial, with the singing of "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" becoming standard at most ballparks. The role of the umpire has been perhaps the most affected by technological advancement, with instant replay challenging calls that were once final and unquestionable. While this has increased accuracy, it has also changed the fundamental nature of the game, removing some of the human element that made baseball unique. The debate over how much technology should be used in officiating reflects broader questions about the balance between perfection and character in sports. The umpire's job requires split-second decision-making under intense pressure, with every call subject to scrutiny from players, managers, fans, and media. The best umpires combine technical knowledge with strong interpersonal skills, maintaining control of the game while earning respect from players and coaches. The strike zone, that invisible box that defines the difference between a ball and a strike, remains one of the most debated and subjective aspects of baseball. Different umpires have different strike zones, and hitters and pitchers must adapt to these variations throughout a game. The introduction of electronic strike zone systems in some minor leagues has been controversial, with some arguing that the human element of umpiring is essential to the game's character. The art of framing, where catchers subtly influence umpires' strike zone calls through their positioning and movement, represents one of the game's most sophisticated skills. The best framers can turn borderline pitches into strikes through technique and timing, adding runs to their team's offense through defense. This skill, largely invisible to casual fans, is increasingly valued by teams and analysts. The evolution of pitching has been perhaps the most dramatic change in modern baseball, with specialization reaching levels that would have been unimaginable in earlier eras. The concept of pitch counts, once unknown, now dominates strategic thinking, with starters rarely expected to pitch more than 6 or 7 innings. This has created new roles: the long reliever, the setup man, the closer, each with specific responsibilities and skills. The closer role, in particular, has become highly specialized, with these pitchers often used only in save situations, despite criticism that this limits their value to the team. The psychology of closing, which requires the ability to perform under maximum pressure with no margin for error, has created a unique subset of players who thrive in these high-stakes situations. The velocity of modern pitching has increased dramatically, with fastballs regularly exceeding 100 miles per hour. This increase in velocity has changed the game in fundamental ways, reducing the time hitters have to react and increasing the importance of plate discipline and pitch recognition. The arms race between pitchers throwing harder and hitters trying to catch up has created a more dynamic but also more dangerous game. The Tommy John surgery, named after the pitcher who was the first to undergo the procedure, has become almost routine for pitchers, allowing them to return from elbow injuries that would have ended careers in previous eras. The high rate of these surgeries, particularly among young pitchers, has raised questions about training methods and the physical demands placed on developing arms. The increase in pitcher injuries, despite advances in medical knowledge and training methods, has led to extensive research into the causes and prevention of arm problems. The relationship between velocity, pitch counts, and injury risk continues to be studied, with teams investing heavily in biomechanical analysis and injury prevention programs. The concept of the opener, where a team starts a relief pitcher for an inning or two before bringing in a bulk pitcher, represents a radical departure from traditional pitching roles. This strategy, designed to maximize matchup advantages and avoid giving opposing hitters multiple looks at the same pitcher, has been controversial but effective for some teams. The defensive shift, where fielders are positioned based on statistical analysis of where hitters are most likely to hit the ball, has become commonplace in modern baseball. This strategy has reduced offensive output and changed the way hitters approach their at-bats, with some learning to hit to the opposite field to defeat the shift. Recent rule changes have limited the extent of shifting, representing an attempt to restore balance between offense and defense. The shift has created new strategic considerations for both offensive and defensive teams. Hitters must decide whether to try to beat the shift by hitting to the opposite field or to try to hit over or through the shifted fielders. Managers must balance the statistical advantages of shifting against the risks of leaving large areas of the field undefended. The launch angle revolution has transformed hitting instruction, with players now taught to hit the ball in the air rather than on the ground. This approach, supported by statistical analysis showing that fly balls are more likely to result in hits and extra base hits, has increased home run production but also strikeout rates. The trade-off between power and contact has become a central strategic consideration for hitters and hitting coaches. The emphasis on launch angle has changed the way young players are taught to hit, with traditional instruction about hitting line drives being replaced by teaching that emphasizes getting the ball in the air. This change has been controversial among traditional hitting coaches who believe that contact and consistency are more important than power. The rise of the bullpen game, where teams use multiple relievers instead of a traditional starting pitcher, has changed the way games are managed and contested. This approach allows teams to maximize their best pitcher's impact while avoiding the traditional disadvantages of having pitchers face hitters multiple times in a game. The strategy has been successful, but has also made games longer and more tactical. The importance of rest and recovery in modern baseball has led to increased use of load management, where key players are given strategic days off to maintain their performance over the course of a long season. This approach, while beneficial for player health and performance, has sometimes frustrated fans who attend games expecting to see their favorite players. The development of biomechanical analysis has allowed teams to optimize players' movements for maximum efficiency and injury prevention. Motion capture technology and force plates can identify inefficiencies in a player's swing or delivery, leading to improvements that might not be visible to the naked eye. This scientific approach to player development represents a new frontier in baseball instruction. The integration of video analysis into player preparation has changed the way hitters and pitchers prepare for games. Players now have access to detailed video of their opponent's tendencies, allowing them to make more informed decisions about strategy and approach. This information advantage has made the game more tactical and strategic. The role of nutrition and sports science in modern baseball has expanded dramatically, with teams employing nutritionists, sleep specialists, and other experts to optimize players' physical and mental performance. The recognition that diet, sleep, and recovery are as important as practice and training represents a holistic approach to player development. The use of wearable technology to monitor players' physical condition and performance has become common, with devices tracking everything from heart rate to sleep patterns to throwing velocity. This data helps teams make informed decisions about player usage and health, potentially preventing injuries and optimizing performance. The development of virtual reality training systems has created new opportunities for players to practice and prepare without the physical demands of traditional training. Hitters can face virtual pitchers, and pitchers can work on their mechanics in simulated game situations. While these technologies cannot replace actual game experience, they provide valuable supplementary training opportunities. The growth of women's participation in baseball, both as players and in professional roles, has gradually increased over the years. While still limited compared to men's participation, the presence of women in various aspects of the game has begun to change perspectives and create new opportunities. The appointment of women to coaching and front office positions has been particularly significant. The youth baseball landscape has become increasingly competitive and specialized, with travel teams, showcases, and specialized coaching becoming the norm for serious players. This has created opportunities for more intensive development, but has also raised concerns about the cost and accessibility of high-level youth baseball. The proliferation of travel teams and year-round competition has changed the nature of youth baseball, with players often specializing in baseball at younger ages rather than playing multiple sports. This specialization can lead to improved skills, but also increases the risk of overuse injuries and burnout. The college baseball system has become increasingly important as a pathway to professional baseball, with the College World Series serving as a showcase for the best amateur talent. The scholarship limitations in college baseball have created a complex recruiting environment where academic performance is often as important as athletic ability. The relationship between baseball and education has always been complex, with the demands of professional baseball often conflicting with academic pursuits. The development of programs that allow players to continue their education while pursuing professional careers represents an important evolution in how the sport approaches player development. The impact of social and economic factors on baseball participation has created disparities in access to the game, with youth from lower-income families sometimes unable to afford the equipment, training, and travel required to compete at high levels. Various programs have been developed to address these disparities, but challenges remain. The cost of youth baseball has increased dramatically, with families often spending thousands of dollars annually on equipment, coaching, and travel. This has created barriers to participation that disproportionately affect lower-income families and communities, contributing to the decline in diversity within the sport. The environmental impact of baseball, from the water and chemicals used to maintain fields to the energy consumed by stadiums, has become an increasingly important consideration. Teams have begun implementing sustainability programs and green technologies to reduce their environmental footprint. The maintenance of playing surfaces requires significant water usage and chemical applications, particularly in arid regions where teams play. The development of more sustainable maintenance practices and drought-resistant playing surfaces has become a priority for environmentally conscious organizations. The preservation of baseball history through museums, archives, and digital collections has become increasingly important as the game's early participants pass away. The Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown serves as the sport's primary repository of history. But numerous other institutions work to preserve and share the game's rich heritage. The National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum houses the world's largest collection of baseball artifacts and documents, serving as both a tourist destination and a research facility for scholars and historians. The museum's exhibits tell the story of baseball's evolution while honoring the players and figures who shaped the game. The research into baseball's origins and early development continues to reveal new insights about the game's evolution and cultural significance. Historians and researchers have challenged many long-held beliefs about baseball's development, creating a more nuanced and accurate understanding of the game's past. The Society for American Baseball Research, SABR, has played a crucial role in advancing baseball scholarship, with thousands of members contributing research and analysis that has deepened our understanding of the game's history and development. The organization's annual convention and publications have become essential resources for baseball historians and analysts. The literature of baseball has produced some of the finest sports writing in American culture, from the early newspaper accounts that established the game's mythology to the sophisticated analyses that attempt to understand its deeper meanings. Baseball's unique rhythm and structure seem particularly suited to literary treatment, creating a rich tradition of baseball writing that continues to evolve. The works of writers like Roger Angell, whose elegant prose captured the essence of baseball's appeal, and Thomas Boswell, whose analytical approach combined statistical insight with poetic observation, have elevated baseball writing to an art form. These writers understood that baseball was more than just a game. It was a lens through which to examine American culture and values. The philosophy of baseball, with its emphasis on individual achievement within a team context, its acceptance of failure as an inevitable part of success, and its celebration of both tradition and innovation, offers insights that extend far beyond the game itself. The lessons learned on the baseball field about persistence, teamwork, handling pressure, and maintaining dignity in both victory and defeat are applicable to all aspects of life. The future of baseball will undoubtedly bring new challenges and opportunities, new technologies and techniques, new players and new ways of understanding the game. But the fundamental elements that have made baseball America's pastime, the strategic complexity, the individual drama, the seasonal rhythm, the connection between past and present, will endure. The next generation of fans will discover the same magic that has captivated millions before them. The perfect tension of a full count, the beauty of a well-executed double play, the anticipation that builds through 9 innings of scoreless baseball. They will learn to appreciate the game's subtleties, to understand its strategies, to feel the emotions that make baseball more than just a sport. The stadiums may change, the rules may evolve, the players may become faster and stronger, but the essence of baseball, that perfect combination of individual skill and team strategy, of tradition and innovation, of hope and heartbreak, will remain constant. It is this essence that has made baseball not just a game, but a cultural institution, not just entertainment, but a shared experience that connects us to our past and to each other. In the end, baseball endures because it reflects something fundamental about the human experience: the desire to compete, to achieve, to belong to something larger than ourselves. It survives because it creates community, because it provides a common language for people who might otherwise have little in common, because it offers hope that tomorrow might be better than today. As the sun sets on another day at the ballpark, as the lights come on and the crowd settles in for the evening's entertainment, as the pitcher takes the mound and the batter steps into the box, the eternal drama of baseball begins again. It is a drama that has played out millions of times before and will play out millions of times again, each iteration unique yet part of the same timeless story. The story continues, inning by inning, season by season, generation by generation. It is a story without end, a conversation between past and future, a bridge between who we were and who we might become. It is the story of baseball, and it is our story too. In its rhythms we find the pulse of American life. In its heroes we see reflections of our own aspirations. In its failures we recognize our own humanity. Baseball is more than a game. It is a repository of memory, a keeper of dreams, a teacher of life's most essential lessons. It reminds us that success is temporary, that failure is inevitable, that the only thing that truly matters is how we respond to both. It shows us that individual excellence can coexist with team success, that competition can breed respect rather than hatred, that sport at its best can bring out the finest qualities in those who play it and those who watch it. The green grass, the red dirt, the white lines that define fair territory. These simple elements combine to create something magical, something that transcends the sum of its parts. The crack of the bat, the pop of the glove, the roar of the crowd. These sounds form a symphony that speaks to something deep within the American soul. And so the game continues, as it always has, as it always will. Through wars and peace, prosperity and depression, social change and cultural upheaval, baseball endures. It adapts without losing its essential character, evolves without forgetting its roots, grows without sacrificing its soul. It is our past, our present, and our future, all contained within the perfect geometry of a diamond, all measured in the sacred distance of 90 feet, all played out under the vast American sky that has witnessed every triumph and every heartbreak, every beginning and every end. The story of baseball is the story of America itself, imperfect but striving, traditional yet innovative, individual yet collective. It is a story that will continue to unfold as long as there are players willing to step between the lines, fans willing to believe in magic, and a nation willing to dream.